Ecuador's National Assembly has called for the resignation of the country's prison authorities following the recent deadly prison riots. The foreign ministers of Sudan and Egypt met in Cairo on Tuesday to discuss bilateral cooperation as well as Ethiopia's dam on the Nile River, which has sparked controversy in the region. And the Democratic Republic of Congo became the latest nation to receive doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine through the WHO's Covax initiative this Tuesday. Hello and welcome to teleSUR English. I am Estefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito in Ecuador. This is from the south. In Ecuador, the National Assembly demanded the resignation of authorities due to the recent deadly prison riots and called for the declaration of a state of emergency in the country's prisons. On Monday, the Assembly demanded President Lenín Moreno remove the head of the country's prisons and the rehabilitation system, as well as the government ministers. Lawmakers assured that the authorities are responsible for the prison crisis that triggered on February 23rd, which left 79 prisoners dead, with 84 votes in favor, 1 blank, and 34 abstentions. The National Assembly demanded the immediate dismissal of Interior Minister Patricio Pazmiño, the director of the National Service for the Comprehensive Care of People Deprived of Liberty, Edmundo Moncayo, and Joana Pesantes, president of the Technical Agency for Social Rehabilitation. In Bolivia, the distribution of electoral materials for the upcoming regional elections in March continues. On Sunday, Polls Bolivias will elect the municipality authorities and governors for a 5-year term. In this sense, the Supreme Electoral Court reported that on Monday, the distribution of the electoral material for the voting begun, which will be guarded by 25,000 police officers. The governing body noted that the same biosecurity measures from last year's elections will be taken, like establishing voting schedules in order to avoid crowds in the voting centers. After the legislative and municipal elections last Sunday in El Salvador, President Nayib Bukele consolidated its political power after his New Ideas party triumphed in the elections. According to preliminary information of the Supreme Electoral Court, the ruling party New Ideas not only achieved so far 58 of 84 seats in the Legislative Assembly, but also in the votes for municipal councils. The partial results estimate that the coalition led by New Ideas has won in 137 mayors' offices of the 262 municipalities of the country, in addition to winning in all the departmental capitals. On a national scale, the Arena Party managed to win 41 mayor seats, and in a preliminary data, the Farabundo Martí National Liberation Front has managed to win in 31 local governments. In Colombia, another indigenous social leader was murdered in the department of Sucre. The Institute for Development and Peace Studies denounced the murder of Jaime Basilio, who was an indigenous social leader in the municipality of San Onofre. Basilio served as first constable of the Corregimiento de Libertad Town Council. 28 social leaders and human rights defenders have been murdered so far this year, while 1,144 have been murdered since the signing of the peace agreement. Senator Gustavo Petro denounced the death of the indigenous leader and warned of an increase in paramilitary activities in Sucre department, as well as continued drug trafficking without the justice system taking any action. Colombia's National Movement of Victims of State Crimes has presented a report revealing the existence of more than 900 unidentified bodies in Medellin's cemetery, all of which could be victims of forced disappearance and extrajudicial executions. This study, which was delivered to the Missing Persons Unit, points out the lack of a single organized database with all the information on unidentified and unclaimed bodies, exhumations, and those handed over to relatives. The director of the unit, Luz Marina Monzon, stressed the importance of the report and pledged to make efforts to coordinate a search plan that includes the cemetery. Protests in Haiti continue. This Tuesday, a group of judges marched in the capital Port-au-Prince in rejection of the government of President Jovenel Moïse. Jurists marched in the capital of the country condemned the arrest of a group of judges appointed by the government of Moïse for having alleged ties with a transitional government, which sought to replace him as the head of the country. In the middle of the protests, now entering their third week, the country's courts only handle urgent cases with minimum service and threaten to prolong the situation until the government responds to their demands. This Tuesday marks the 5th anniversary of the assassination of Honduran environmental activist Berta Cáceres. Civil society organizations in the Central American country and other environmental activists are leading a day of commemoration and struggle for justice. Berta Cáceres, who co-founded the Civic Council of Popular and Indigenous Organizations of Honduras, was murdered on March 2, 2016 because of her leadership of a campaign to prevent the construction of a hydroelectric dam with international funding on a river sacred to the Lenca people, her community of origin. The foreign ministers of Sudan and Egypt met in Cairo on Tuesday to discuss bilateral cooperation as well as Ethiopia's dam on the Nile River, which has sparked controversy in the region. Sudanese Foreign Minister Mariam al-Sadiq al-Mahdi and her Egyptian counterpart Sameh Shoukry stressed the importance of reaching a legal agreement on the filling and the operating of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, preserving the water rights of all three countries. Both foreign ministers also called on Ethiopia to show goodwill and engage in an effective negotiating process in order to reach such an agreement. The ministers said they agreed on developing a negotiating mechanism sponsored by the African Union.
There can be no endless negotiations or negotiations to come, with one side continuing to take unilateral measures. Otherwise, the matter becomes a mess and leads to nothing but imposing the will on two parties and imposing their peoples to existential risks.
We cannot remain silent on these behaviors that took place last year and that we were announced for this year in the second phase. So we are all transparently seeking that our neighbor Ethiopia stop these individual actions because they may take the whole region to a stage that no one wants to go.
Three female media workers were shot and killed in the eastern Afghan city of Jalalabad this Tuesday, according to their TV network, in what appeared to be the latest targeted killing to rock the war-torn country. No group has claimed responsibility for the attack so far. Nangarhar Police Chief Juma Gul Hemmat reported that an armed suspect was detained after the shootings, adding that authorities were still searching for other culprits. Targeted killings have increased since the start of peace talks between the Afghan government and also the Taliban last year in the latest attempt to end decades of conflict following the U.S. invasion in the country.
Today, our three sisters have been shot dead. All of them were our colleagues for more than 2 years in the dubbing department. They were very good people. I have no words. All I can say is this was a brutal act against them. I think killing women is a major sin. According to our information, unfortunately, 3 of our sisters, media workers, were killed and 2 other women were wounded. Just now, we arrested a man by the name of Kari Baser who had a weapon and a rickshaw and who led the shooting day.
The U.S. airstrike on Syria last Friday was followed by another similar attack by Israel on Sunday, February 28th, which launched missiles from the occupied Syrian Golan Heights. Damascus has denounced both attacks as representing U.S. and Zionist support for the terrorist groups that continue to operate in parts of the country in order to prevent their total defeat by Syrian forces. We have more details in the following report by our correspondent Hisham Buenos.
The Syrian government described the U.S. attack as cowardly and warned that it will have consequences that will increase tensions in the region, contrary to the Pentagon's version that the airstrike hit pro-Iranian forces, endangering American personnel in the region. Damascus condemned the military intervention in support of terrorist groups attacking the country and called on the United States to change its aggressive strategy towards Syria. which goes against international law and the Charter of the United Nations.
Daesh has failed to fulfill the plans of the United States, which is the reason for this direct attack by the main sponsor of terrorism, and it targets several geopolitical objectives in the area, among which the main goal is to break the geographical connection between the members of the Axis of Resistance, Iraq, Syria, and Iran.
In the same context, and 2 days after the US bombing, the Israeli regime, under the same false excuse of attacking Iranian positions on Syrian soil, committed a new airstrike against Damascus. The Syrian Arab Army's air defense system repelled the attack and shot down most of the enemy missiles that Damascus denounces as seeking to stop its victories against terrorism and its sponsors.
These continuous attacks are aimed at encouraging the defeated terrorists and slowing down the advances of the Syrian Arab Army, especially since a large military operation is currently underway in the Syrian semi-desert area against the remnants of Daesh. So this aggression is closely linked to the recent US attack, since both seek the same objective of protecting the terrorists to keep the situation in the whole region tense.
Meanwhile, in spite of the incessant US and Zionist attacks and the continuous Western political and economic pressures against the country, the Syrian people remain steadfast in their support for their national army and its allies in their struggle for the liberation of Syrian soil and the entire region from both the terrorist groups and the foreign invading forces, led by the United States and the occupying Israeli troops.
And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan pledged a series of new measures on Tuesday to improve rights and freedoms in the country.
Our aim here is to strengthen even more the concept of a state of law based on human rights. We will regularly review legislation and implementation accordingly and will take all necessary precautions. Thereby, we are speeding up talks with the European Union, especially on issues that we expect to encounter in the visa liberation dialogue. The ultimate aim of our Human Rights Action Plan is a new and civilian constitution.
The director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Christopher Wray, offered his testimonies to the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee hearing this Tuesday regarding the events of January 6, when a mob of Donald Trump's supporters stormed the Capitol in Washington, D.C. During his statements, Wray said that the insurrection of January 6 was part of a spiraling domestic terrorism in the U.S. He also stated that the FBI is investigating those involved in the events and dismissed allegations of fake Trump supporters who tried to engage in violence and acts of provocation. According to the FBI, and over 200 people have already been federally charged for participating in the assault on the Capitol.
The FBI has been working day and night across the country to track down those responsible for the events of January 6th and to hold them accountable. We're chasing down leads, we're reviewing evidence, combing through digital media to identify, investigate, and arrest anyone who broke the law that day.
The ultimate responsibility for this attack rests on the shoulders of those who unlawfully entered the Capitol. I've also made very clear that everyone involved must take responsibility for their actions that day, including our former president. Now, in the wake of January 6th, we must seriously examine the threats of domestic extremism. But unfortunately, this threat isn't limited to the events of that terrible day.
The Democratic Republic of Congo received its first batch of AstraZeneca vaccines against COVID-19 through the global Covax initiative this Tuesday. The vaccine doses were received at Kinshasa's International Airport by Health Minister Eteni Longondo. The arrival of the doses made by AstraZeneca and India's Serum Institute was previously announced by the Director General of the World Health Organization. He also announced that the country has reported a total of over 26,000 coronavirus cases and more than 700 deaths, to rank 22nd in Africa. And the head of the World Health Organization highlighted Covax's achievements so far as the initiative gathers momentum.
Yesterday, Colombia became the first country in the Americas to receive its Covax deliveries. And today, we expect deliveries to Angola, Cambodia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Nigeria. In total, Covax will deliver 11 million doses this week, and between now and the end of May, 237 million doses of vaccines will be allocated to 142 participating economies and countries in Covax. The distribution of vaccines has not been as equitable as we would have liked, but it has certainly been more equitable than it would have been otherwise. And we still have many challenges to overcome, including the local production barriers related to intellectual property that His Excellency had already said.
This Tuesday in Nicaragua, the vaccination against COVID-19 began. The information was confirmed by the Vice President Rosario Murillo. In this first phase of the immunization of patients with underlying conditions will be prioritized. The authorities will start the vaccination plan after receiving a batch of the vaccine Sputnik V donated by Moscow on February 24th. Next Saturday, it is expected that the arrival of another shipment from India with 200,000 vaccines. In this sense, Murillo thanked the solidarity of both countries with the Nicaraguan people. Another batch of 130,000 vaccines against coronavirus managed through Covax mechanism will arrive in Managua in the next few days. Around 100 teachers in Spain are reportedly overcoming side effects after receiving the AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine over the weekends. The Federation of Parents Associations reported that at least 91 teachers did not attend classes in the municipality of Leganés in the community of Madrid after reporting fever and general unwellness as side effects of the shots. Local authorities reported that more than 24,000 teachers received the first dose of the drug and assured that just 50 of them were unable to continue teaching due to the side effects of the vaccine. And staying in Spain, the number of people registered as unemployed surpassed the 4 million for the first time in 5 years in February as pandemic restrictions hit the country's tourism-dependent economy. Regional governments, which are responsible for health, have imposed measures to try to curb the spread of COVID-19, including shutting down bars and restaurants and nightly curfews, which have hit the hospitality sector hardest.
We are witnessing the hangover left by the health pandemic, which translates into economic consequences. Of course, the Spanish government trusts in the resilience shown by our production sectors in the third trimester of the 2020, after the first wave, and we hope they show it again in the second trimester. This has a very significant impact on a part of our productive sector. Above all, what is linked to the premature closure of leisure, retail, catering and hotel and catering establishments, which is linked to the mobility of tourists. In other words, certain areas of activity which, due to the obligatory actions that the autonomous communities have had to implement, have been affected by this restriction.
This Tuesday, Iraq started to vaccinate its health workers, elderly people, and members of security forces after receiving the first batch of COVID-19 vaccines donated by China. Iraq is facing a second wave of the virus, with more than 3,000 cases reported daily. Along with the Sinopharm shot, Iraq also approved the Pfizer and the AstraZeneca vaccines for use. Health worker Mohammed Kudir from the Al-Kif hospital urged all Iraqi citizens to get vaccinated. To date, Iraq registers over 700,000 COVID-19 cases and more than 13,000 deaths. Experts are concerned that the renewed rise in infections could get worse by Pope's historic visit to the country later this week, an event that's expected to draw large crowds.
Today, we are the participants of Al-Kif Hospital. We came and got the coronavirus vaccines and were the first to be vaccinated. After half an hour, I am still in good health. I am calling upon the citizens not to be afraid of this vaccine. The vaccine is safe and good, and with God's help, it will help all Iraqis. We are the first lot to have it. Then the elderly will be vaccinated, and those who have chronic diseases. Thanks God, there are no defects or any fears of this vaccine.
In Finland, authorities reintroduced the state of emergency, a move that allows the closure of restaurants for a 3-week period as the country fights the variant first discovered in Britain.
The situation with the pandemic is severe and is getting worse. Therefore, the government feels it is necessary that we reduce our physical contacts by all means and measures possible and available. I now appeal to all citizens. Let's protect our own health and the health of those close to us as well as our fellow citizens. Let's avoid places and situations where there is a possibility for physical contacts. Let's keep distance, take care of hygiene and wear masks. Everyone is able to influence into what kind of spring and summer we will have. Thank you for caring and acting responsibly.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on our social media accounts. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram as well. For telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. See you next time.